I was in the supermarket, and, by coincidence, I ended up picking up items in similar aisles to a woman who was in front of me. Suddenly, she turned to me and asked why I was following her. When I explained that I was just shopping, she took out her cell phone and called the police. If there was one thing I thought would never happen to me, it was being accused of stalking someone in the supermarket. I mean, I just wanted to buy bread, milk, and a few things for the house. But apparently, that made me a high-level spy in someone's disturbed mind. The day started normally enough. I took my trolley, entered the market, and went straight to the bread section. My aim was clear: to get in, get what I needed, and get out without my wallet collapsing. That's when she appeared. A woman I didn't know, with a tense posture and an expression like she was ready to complain about something. At first, I didn't pay any attention. After all, it was a supermarket. People were shopping and no one should be checking up on them. I grabbed a packet of bread and went to the cold cuts section, and there she was again. Okay, coincidence. I carried on walking. I went to get some milk, and who was there, with her hands on her hips and a suspicious look on her face? That's right. It was at that moment that I began to notice that she was noticing me. You know when someone stares at you, but tries to pretend they're not staring? The kind of look that comes and goes too quickly? That's right. That was it. Every time I picked something off the shelf, I felt those eyes piercing my soul. Still, I got on with my life. Because, you see, I wasn't doing anything wrong until I reached the drinks section. I grabbed a bottle of juice, and then, out of nowhere, I heard a grumble. I looked over, and there she was, now with an expression of pure indignation. And then, out of nowhere, she huffed loudly and walked away quickly, as if she was running away from something. That's when I knew something absurd was about to happen. But not even in my wildest dreams could I have predicted what would happen next. You know that moment when you feel that something is going to go wrong, but you decide to ignore it because you believe in the common sense of humanity? Well, that was my mistake. After the bizarre scene of the woman huffing and puffing as if she had been offended by my existence, I went on my way. I still needed to pick up a few things before going to the checkout. After all, I wasn't going to stop buying my juice just because someone decided it was offensive. But then came the strange part. I mean, even stranger. I began to notice that, even after I'd walked away, she was still watching me. Now, from a distance, pretending to look at the products while staring at me through the reflections of the glass shelves. The stalker was calling me a stalker. I stopped at the cookie section, trying to ignore the situation. I picked up a packet, evaluated the price, and it was at that very moment that I felt a weight of fury radiating from a few meters away. When I turned, I saw the woman looking straight at me, arms crossed, feet tapping the floor, as if she was waiting for me to say something. That's when she exploded. You think I didn't notice? The market, which had previously been going at a normal pace, fell silent for a second. A couple looking at cereals stopped in the middle of the movement. An employee refilling cans froze in mid-air. Well, I was still trying to understand what the hell was going on. The woman pointed at me, full of certainty, as if she had just solved a crime. "You're following me. Now, you see, I'm a patient person. I try to give the benefit of the doubt. But that was, without a doubt, the most ridiculous accusation I've ever heard in my life. Apparently, the simple act of shopping in the same supermarket as someone else was now grounds for denunciation. I blinked a few times, processing the scene. I could feel the people around me holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. And that's when she did the worst possible thing. She picked up her cell phone and started dialing. The woman was calling the police because, according to her logic, I was a supermarket criminal. And I knew that my day was about to get infinitely worse. If someone told me that one day I would be accused of stalking inside a supermarket and that the police would be called, I would laugh in their face. But there I was, standing in the middle of the cookie aisle, watching a hysterical woman dial 911 as if she were about to report a heinous crime. And the best part? She spoke loudly on purpose, as if to ensure that everyone around her heard her completely crazy version of the story. I was still trying to absorb the bizarreness of the situation when I noticed the stares of the other customers. Some whispered, others just stared, waiting to see where this was going. You could see on their faces that nobody knew which side sanity was on in this story. The employee restocking the shelves pretended not to see anything, but was clearly enjoying the scene. And then she began to describe the crime on the phone. There's a man here who's been following me for several minutes. He appears in every corridor I'm in, picking up the same things as me. I was impressed by the way she turned a completely normal sequence of events into a narrative of pure terror. She spoke as if she were in the middle of a thriller movie, trying to escape from a dangerous stalker. She continued, "I'm sure he's stalking me. He pretends to be shopping, but every time I turn around, he's there. That can't be a coincidence." The best part? The sales clerk was trying to hold in his laughter. The cashier looked at me with that, "My God, why did I come to work today?" expression. And me? Well, I just existed. Suddenly, she stopped talking and fell silent. From what it sounded like, the person on the other end of the line asked something that dismantled all her conviction. I could see that she couldn't justify it in a way that sounded even remotely logical. But instead of giving up, she doubled down. "I demand that you send a policeman here now." And that's how I realized that, in a few minutes, I would have to explain myself to the police about why I dared to shop in the same market as this woman. Because the absurdity, my friends, had not yet reached its limit. The feeling of knowing that the police were on their way because I dared to shop was so surreal that I began to wonder if I was still awake or had passed out and entered a parallel reality of sheer idiocy. The whole supermarket had already noticed the bizarreness of the situation. Some people pretended not to be paying attention, others looked directly at me, waiting to see what would happen. Meanwhile, the woman remained firmly in her scene. She stood back a little, pretending to be under imminent threat. She crossed her arms, shook her head, muttering to herself as if she was completely indignant that she was still breathing the same air as me. And then, the inevitable happened. The supermarket's automatic door opened, and 2 policemen entered. It was at that moment that visible regret hit her face. Yes, because it was one thing to make a fuss in the market, to attract attention, to look like a persecuted victim. But it was quite another to have to look real police officers in the eye and explain that her emergency was a man taking the same products as me. I could see the sweat forming on her forehead. One of the officers looked around, clearly trying to identify where the supposed crime scene was. The other policeman, a guy who looked like he'd seen a lot of stupidity in his life, crossed his arms and waited for her to explain. And that's when the big moment happened. The woman took a deep breath and pointed at me. "That's him." The policeman looked at me. They analyzed me from head to toe. And then they looked at her, waiting for her to say something that made sense. She tried. She really tried. She started to explain how I was following her around the supermarket, appearing in the aisles, picking up products near her. But as the words came out of her mouth, her own brain seemed to realize how ridiculous it sounded. You could see the desperation growing in her eyes. The silence that followed was so uncomfortable that even the cashier ducked her head, trying to disguise her embarrassment. And it was there, my friends, that I realized that this woman had dug her own grave. But she wasn't yet ready to accept defeat. Not without one last desperate attempt. The whole supermarket was silent. The woman had just told her story to the police, and now everyone was waiting to see how she was going to get out of it. The problem? Even she didn't know. The policeman's expression was a mixture of boredom and confusion. Clearly, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. One of them looked at me, then at her, and then asked, with the calm of someone who has already lost faith in humanity, "Madam, is he just shopping?" The whole supermarket held its breath, because, at that moment, she realized that she had screwed up. Her eyes went wide for a split second. She knew there was no way out, but instead of accepting defeat with dignity, she decided to double down. But he appeared in every corridor I was in. The policeman blinked a few times, absorbing the magnitude of the stupidity he had just heard. That's a supermarket. It was the simplest and most devastating answer he could have given. The woman had no reaction. For the first time since this madness began, she was completely speechless. Reality finally hit. She had called the police because someone had shopped in the same market as her. The officers exchanged a quick glance between themselves, as if they were mentally deciding who was going to write this shameful occurrence in the report. I, on the other hand, was completely calm. I mean, after being accused of persecution for buying milk and bread, I had nothing left to lose. Then came the final blow. One of the policemen pulled a notebook out of his pocket and started writing. You could see the color fading from her face. She tried to argue, but she knew that at this point, there was no way she could be a victim. The ticket was handed over. Fake 911 call. Her embarrassment was pure, absolute, and irreversible. What about me? I took my trolley, went to the checkout, paid for my shopping, and left as if nothing had happened. Because, at the end of the day, I just wanted to take my bread and milk home. Have you ever been in a situation as absurd as this? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this story, subscribe to the channel and like it, so you don't miss the next ones. Want to see more unbelievable stories? Click on card, and get ready for more moments of pure shame. See you in the next video.